Thank you, Benny. Our next speaker this afternoon is Larry Mason. Larry is kind of a rare bird. Rare bird because he's got 40 years of experience in academia and actually working. He's got a lot of practical experience as well. But Larry's been a friend of ITC for many years. He's participated in the branding and marketing study and most recently in the IFMAT as a member of the IFMAT team. Those of you who have had the pleasure of working with Larry and meeting with him know that he's a guy that likes to have a good time at these sessions. But Larry's really a no-nonsense kind of guy, and I really appreciate the insights and the information that he brings forward. So, Larry.
Thank you, Gary. I'd like to start by thanking the Coquille Tribe, the Intertribal Timber Council, and all the folks that helped put together this symposium. As is always the case year after year, these are terrific events, and it's a great privilege to be asked to share thoughts with so many good friends and esteemed colleagues. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about collaborative forestry and landscape stewardship. As pressures on America's forests mount, so has interest in what we now call collaborative forestry. And how we proceed forward is pretty critical at this time. I'm going to talk a little bit about landscape stewardship, and that it will help inform a review of collaborative forestry when we're going to pay special attention to what the potential implications are for tribes. So, the paramount responsibility for all of us, as established in rhetoric and regulation, is sustainability. We've seen various presentations of this concept throughout the day. I particularly want to call your attention to the circular and interconnected nature of sustainability, and that's what I think makes this simple diagram so useful. The Brundtland Report, or the World Commission on Environment and Development, referred to it as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the future. We hear about it in tribal council meetings as planning for the seventh generation. However, we all agree that sustainability is the target. We're having a great deal of difficulty achieving it. My colleague Gary Morishima has referred to these circumstances as the death spiral, as a matter of fact. So let's look a little bit further. The problem is that sustainability requires stewardship, and stewardship has been sorely lacking. In order to better understand what this means, as part of the IFMAT 3 project, we created a new three-circle diagram for stewardship that brought together the components that we felt essential: vision, commitment, and capability. So with this as preface, I want to move forward based on the assumption that our ability to achieve success in collaborative forestry will be dependent upon our collective ability to summon stewardship forward. So in 2007, the Council on Environmental Quality in the White House looked at what was going on with collaboration. Collaborative approaches to engaging the public and assessing the impacts of federal actions under NEPA can improve the quality of decision-making and increase public trust and confidence in agency decisions. That's the good news. But the full potential for more actively identifying and engaging federal, tribal, state, and local agencies, affected and interested parties, and the public at large in collaborative environmental analysis and federal decision-making is rarely realized. There are a number of collaborative programs that have come forward in recent years: Forest Legacy Program, Resilient Landscapes, and several others. Perhaps the most significant one is called the Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program, which is funded through the Forest Service and currently has 23 collaborative forest landscape restoration sites across the country. The objective is to encourage the collaborative, science-based ecosystem restoration of priority forest landscapes. We'll return to that thought. So, collaborative. Jim Peterson has recently launched a series in Evergreen Magazine of interviews with stakeholders and participants in collaboration. It's a very good series, well worth reading. I went through that series and pulled out some representative comments. The first one from an environmentalist. The only way we'd ever get more land classified as wilderness was through the collaborative process. The next one, county commissioner, looking to return economic benefit to his county. The third one, Forest Service supervisor. Forest restoration is our goal. Oh, but by the way, timber could be a byproduct. And then the last being the sawmill owner. Collaboration is delivering logs to our mills, so I'm supporting it. But the collaboration process is terribly inefficient. We need to figure out how to get it moving faster to get more timber acres treated before they burn up. And I think what we see when we look at these comments is it's unclear to me whether this is a collaborative process to find vision forward for stewardship, or whether this is a negotiation between vested special interests to divide up a public pie. So, looking further, collaborative. IFMAT found, as we've heard in John Gordon's comments this morning, in spite of formidable obstacles, tribal forestry programs are remarkably successful and should be regarded as models of community forestry from which others, especially feds, might learn. However, review of CFLRP literature shows several tribes listed as participants, but reveals no acknowledgement of tribal initiatives such as TFPA or Anchor Forest, or of tribal issues such as reserve treaty rights or cultural values. So returning to the objective, collaborative forest landscape restoration program encourages collaborative science-based ecosystem restoration priority forest landscapes. And then that's followed by a fairly complicated but obtuse definition of restoration. So what does restoration look like? Is restoration effective? This is the record for Forest Service restored acreage reported for 2011. And what we see is of 3.7 million acres reported as restored, no commercial activity occurred on 95% of the acres. In fact, twice as many acres were treated by wildfire as were treated by harvest. Well, federal wildfire management appropriations are now between $3 and $4 billion a year. Some people refer to this as a crisis. I would suggest that this kind of information and the resources lost from wildfires, especially in the West, would suggest that hazardous fuels reductions should be a National Forest Service and CFLRP high priority. However, when we look at the budgets, hazardous fuels reductions are less than 6% of the total National Forest Service budget, and the National Forest Service spends more on research and education programs than on hazardous fuels reduction. So, without timber sales to remove fuel loads, both wildfire hazards and cost of operations remain out of control for national forests. And this is kind of a busy table, but it has value. What this is information presented to the House Subcommittee on Public Lands and Environmental Regulation in 2013. The green columns are states, and the pink columns are the Forest Service. And what we can see is that states perform much better relative to harvest volume per acre, relative to revenues returned, and relative to stumpage values recovered. Not surprisingly, and this is important for tribes, there are 10 states with initiatives to transfer authority for the management of federal lands to state supervision. U.S. national forests are in a crisis. We've heard about it. But as of the IFMAT 3 report, we found since 2004 only 6 TFPA projects covering only 20,000 acres. So, is restoration science-based? Not according to scientists at the Washington Department of Natural Resources. It is not socially or ecologically possible to restore forests and other landscapes in Washington to a condition they were in prior to European settlement. The future will be substantially different than the past, and a return to the historical situation is simply not feasible. Adaptive strategies, not restoration, are best pathways to improve current forest conditions. In fact, Forest Service scientists, as far back as 1995, recognized that in ecology we have moved from the equilibrium theories of Clement's succession trajectories to recognition of patch dynamics and the importance of disturbance recovery regimes in non-equilibrium theory. So the question is, restore what? Wilderness? Intact ecosystems? Inherent in the very definition of wilderness is contained the gulf between the understandings of the two worlds, Indian and Euro-American. Indians do not see the natural world as wilderness. Find Deloria Jr. Virgin forest was not encountered in the 16th and 17th centuries. It was invented in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Stephen Prine. The great enemy of the truth is often not the lie, but the myth. John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And 2,500 years ago, a Greek observed, nothing is permanent but change. Tribes understand this. As a matter of fact, in 1987, the Commission on Environment and Development observed that tribal and indigenous peoples' lifestyles can offer modern societies many lessons in the management of resources in complex forests, mountain, and dryland ecosystems. The Department of Interior will support the use of best available science, including traditional ecological knowledge, in formulating policy. Secretarial Order 3289, Secretary Ken Salazar. Knowledge sharing could help, but CFLRP does not acknowledge traditional ecological knowledge. Ted Strong, 1993. To avoid our own cultural destruction, we will have to prove to the world the genius of tribally held cultural values. This table here displays a comparison between traditional knowledge and scientific ecological knowledge, and I bring you back to my three-circle representation of stewardship. I would suggest that this side, the traditional side, represents vision, whereas this side, science ecological knowledge, represents technical ability. They are different parts of the diagram. So, is it sustainable? 2011 to 2014, CFLRP received $133 million in federal funding. The President's budget now requests it be increased to $60 million a year. The word collaborative, newly popular, appears 120 times in the 2015 National Forest Service budget justification. Anchor forests are not mentioned. Tribal Forest Protection Act is mentioned but once, and that in a description of Officer Tribal Relations responsibilities. Tribal, state, federal comparisons of expenses and revenues per 1,000 board foot of timber sold. You can see the reverse situation on the federal lands from what appears on the state lands and in the BIA Northwest region. Again, it's not surprising that states are working to gain authority over managing federal lands, but this also makes a good argument for tribal management as well. And keep in mind that when we add CFLRP to this, there's an additional $170 a thousand on top. That's almost $400 a thousand for Forest Service timber harvest. So is it sustainable? CFLRP is a 10-year, $400 million program which proposes to treat in total 2 million acres, approximately 2.5% of the National Forest Service forests identified as in need of treatment. Additional funds are needed for monitoring and reporting. Treatment costs will be in addition to regular NFS funding. What does this tell us? It tells us that while restoration may be an elusive concept, it does not equal hazardous fuels reduction. But TFPA could help. Why not encourage TFPA contracts? Shown here a comparison before and after in Montana and New Mexico. When I looked at independent review comments regarding CFLRP, I found 3 reports to cite from. Sites are experiencing difficulties. Oops. Oh. Social and economic benefits. Information sharing within and between agencies is not sufficient. At some project locations, expertise in the workforce and markets for wood products no longer exists. Does this sound familiar to anybody? The National Forest Service is experiencing high personnel turnover rates. It's difficult for stakeholders to sustain involvement through many years of collaborative exercises. National guidance documents indicate an agency culture and political climate in which restoration is promoted as an activity that will pay for itself. But this is not the case. Difficulties of collaboration at a landscape level, changes in economic conditions, restricted in funding, etc. Lots of difficulties. So, returning to our three-circle diagram to characterize stewardship, these are some thoughts from my perspective. Capability means sufficient and competent interdisciplinary staff guided by keepers of knowledge and technical experts. A workforce, anybody can not be able to hear me? I've never really, I'm on? Hello? Oh my goodness. That's more than you wanted. Capability means sufficient and competent interdisciplinary staff guided by keepers of knowledge and technical experts. A workforce and infrastructure to support harvest, transport, process, and sales of forest products must be available. Adequate financial resources for investments will be required from both public and private sources. Terminologies such as restoration discount the dynamic nature of ecosystems and 10,000 years of native influence on the landscape, perpetuate a disaggregated and unbalanced view of sustainability, and undermine stewardship potential. Commitment can evolve over time from collaboration through a process of social learning and durable relationship building founded upon trust. Enduring ties to the land and communities must result. Stewardship will be poorly practiced if approached as a transient career activity or with a priority objective of short-term financial gains. Forest lands need to be dedicated, harvested, and cared for, not sold, converted, or abandoned. Vision. Vision evolves when critical thinking and observations coalesce into guiding principles and understandings of an interconnected world, creating the ability to see the past in the context of potential and adaptive futures. Capability and commitment might be schooled, hired, contracted, or purchased, but vision is only available to those with a long history on the land. Strategies for resource management that ignore the vision and knowledge of America's oldest stewards will fail the future just as they have failed the past. Collective knowledge exchange could help, but it must be reciprocal. Non-Indians must learn to listen. There are three sovereigns in the government-to-government relationships: tribes, states, and the U.S. government. These three sovereigns need to work together to solve problems with three principles: honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. William Burke, Chief, Confederated Tribes of Umatilla. Though many non-Native Americans have learned very little about us, over time we have had to learn everything about them. Wilma Mankiller, Chief, Cherokee Nation. Getting back to the theme of sustainability, it is circular, it is interconnected. Tribes understand these things. Strong and vibrant communities rely upon sustainable forests, which rely upon healthy industries. In the words of Billy Frank Jr., noted Nisqually leader, change has to happen, and it has to happen now. Some people in organizations are against harvesting. Tribes want foresters to harvest. We need a strong industry. So, in conclusion, it should be clear that tribes have significant and much-needed contributions to make to the future of American forestry. Further, the federal government has unique moral and legal obligations to acknowledge the rights of tribes in this regard. But Indian people have long experience with promises that have been subordinated by politics. And I submit a classic example, as highlighted in this presentation, is when agencies co-opt critics by appointing them to committees, giving them money, telling them how important they are, teaching them the right buzzwords. Think, if you will, of assimilation. So, in conclusion, given the endurance capabilities of tribes and given the uncertain circumstances of other forest managers, it's a safe bet that the future will indeed be yours. But the path will not be easy, and as recommended by Butch Blazer this morning, you must ever be persistent. Thank you for your attention.